the centerpiece of the album's first half is finally here. It's Clouds Are Not Real. I did also mention that I decided to make this album after finishing that song. And in the first episode, I think, of the series, because this song captures almost picture perfect the state I was in before taking on the album's production. I was feeling stuck basically. It felt like I was hitting a plateau and wondering whether I'm still happy like I thought I would be now that I'm able to bring my feelings, my thoughts, and my music into life through these songs. And I realized that I'm not that happy. And I don't think I'll ever fully be happy in life. And realizing that for the first time in my life was beyond disappointing. After spending, my teenage years full of hope that the adult me gonna work everything out, clearly I haven't. However, that's only an organized thought of my story, my personal narrative, after deciding on the song, or even after finishing it even. What came before that revelation of mine goes way back to my trip back home again. You can probably tell by now that I had quite a productive holiday. So this time my family went to the mountains instead of the beach like last time where I wrote The Sun Also Needs the Sun. And while traveling around there, we were in the fog, like I would say 40% of the time, because it's practically up there, like clouds level. And that got me thinking, and I talked to my moms about this too, and she seemed to only realize it for the first time. We call it fog because it's right in front of us and we're in it. And we call it clouds when it's above us, when they literally, or scientifically, the same thing. I don't know, or at least in that context. I'm only a musician, don't attack me for that. But what interesting is fog and clouds, they have different connotation tied to them. So for example, when someone tells you that they're in the fog versus when they're in the clouds, what would you think, right? For me, I would say that the one in the fog is probably stuck or lost or even confused, and the other one in the clouds are ecstatic. But yeah, it's interesting how they're literally the polar opposite. Not polar opposite, but like they're very different, when in reality fogs and clouds literally are the same thing. And as interesting as that sounds as a song idea, it only remained as a song idea in my notes app for like 3 months after I first wrote it down, because I felt like I couldn't really flesh out a story or a convincing narrative out of that complex idea, even though it's eventually a starting point for Clouds Are Not Real, because song ideas don't always come to me like lightning bolts, usually not one this complex. And I'm not complaining, it eventually gets me better songs in the end. So yeah. So after having that thought for a while, I started to see my own narrative fitting more and more into it. So yeah, that's how I decided to flesh out a song. That's how Clouds Are Not Real came to be. And in the verse, actually, I started with describing how it feels like to be in the clouds or in the fog. Same thing that we already established. And it goes like this. It's patchy in front of me. It's heavy to lift my knees. With closed eyes, I can't see my breath. I'm losing count up the steps ahead. And my favorite line is this one. With closed eyes, I can't see my breath. And I know it needs some explanation too. It's sarcasm, essentially. Usually when it's cold, because we're at clouds level now, it is cold. When it's cold, you can see your breath, right? But if you're in the fog, you can't, right? So it doesn't matter whether your eyes are open or closed. You just can't see your breath, period. And that's one of my favorite things to do when it comes to writing lyrics too, is to say something really obvious, so sarcastically that it tells so much more about the context, beyond the words, and that's really needed for my intention to do with the verse, because I wanted to tell how it feels like to be in the fog without saying I'm in the fog, because it's like, what, 3 words? I'm in the fog. It doesn't tell you anything about being in the fog or how it feels like. So yeah, I actually learned that the hard way when it comes to writing songs, is to show rather than to tell. I'm in the clouds where I should have found myself, jumping for joy. I miss the ground, I'm hating how my feet don't feel a thing. I'm in the clouds, but what I found was everything I could never touch. You said I'm in the fog, but isn't that the same as clouds? So after spending the entire verse trying to tell that I'm in the fog, the chorus starts with I'm in the clouds. It still feels fascinating to me how different they sound when they actually mean the same thing. So what I do in the chorus is mock that joyful, positive association with being in the clouds. So according to the usual use of that expression, being in the clouds, I should be ecstatic. So jumping for joy is definitely not far off. But, and stay with me here, you physically cannot touch anything when you're in the clouds, right? And to jump, you need a platform or a surface to jump off of, which clearly doesn't exist in the clouds. And the second line, I miss the ground, I'm hating how my feet don't feel a thing. That line just further clarify and emphasize the intangibility of being in the clouds. Like, you can't touch anything, so obviously your feet, if they want to jump, they're gonna miss the ground. And the last line of the chorus, where I bring back the starting point of the songs as the description for in the clouds, is actually one that's for in the fog all along. And I'm insisting that they are interchangeable. It's not even too conveniently or patronizingly used at times. Okay, we get it. In the fog and in the clouds means the same thing regardless of the different association with them. So what? Aren't I making such a fuss over it? It was sunny, the pupil of your eye, ever so slightly, I reached out my hand. Maybe I should have warned myself before I became afraid I fell. So the reason why I'm making such a fuss over that is that it ties back to my personal story. It gets very clear in this verse especially. I'm making a big deal of it and straight up calling it a scam because I am bitter. I feel resentful and disappointed, or whatever you call it, because the clouds I've always dreamed of to take away all of my worries, the place comparable to heaven to me, turns out to have nothing but even more questions for me to answer. And maybe you shouldn't have aimed for the clouds in the first place? Who knows? So underscoring all of these narrative layers with the production gave me quite a hard time actually. Partly because I was greedy, but not only I wanted to leave space for the vocal and the lyrics to tell the story, I also wanted to, somehow sonically depict the story of the song in a way. So aside from the fact that piano and strings first came to my mind because of how rich and expressive they are as a combo, the rhythm section, like drum and bass, like some percussion, was heavily inspired by this song. That's why the track ends up being like a mixture of like classical, jazz, like neo soul, which works out in my favor, and I love it. So I'm not complaining, quite happy with that actually. So in the broader context of the album, I call this song, Clouds Aren't Real, the centerpiece of the first half. Not only because it is the epitome of disappointment, but it also contains a big question that No Promises, the final track, eventually answers. in the end of the album. That correlation between these two tracks alone was one of the main reasons for the double theme structure of this album, like Disappointment and No Promises. In the next episode, we'll have the last track of the first half, 20 I'm Sorry, and you'll get to see how I turned the demo version, which was already out way before this, into the full version, and how they are actually two different songs, two different tracks, because of the different perspective I have when I made the two versions. Anyway, I'll tell you all about that in the next episode. Until then, see ya.